Today we're going on a journey, on a bit of a journey. This weekend we are celebrating Epiphany. Now technically Epiphany doesn't come until January 6th, and Sunday is only the 10th day of Christmas out of the 12 days, and so we're not quite there yet, but it's okay. We're still going to celebrate it this Sunday. And what's important about Epiphany is that Epiphany doesn't just mark the end of the Christmas season, but it also does something else. It celebrates the story of the wise men. And so the first thing that we're going to do as we come into this story today is we're going to start by kind of setting the stage for everything that we're going to be doing. So the first things first is we're going to first get rid of this thing that's here, and so let's get rid of that. And so that gets us started a little bit. And now we need to kind of bring some other pieces into this. And so we're going to bring another piece into this. And this is part of our nativity. So let's bring that in. And so now we've got that in. And so now let's go to the story. Because this nativity scene that you see here, this one's outside the parlor that goes down to the Sunday school classrooms. And it's one kind of, you can almost say it's outside of my office to a certain degree. And it is one that I received a few years ago as a present from a church that I was pastor of. Now, and it looks wonderful, and I love it, and I love being able to share it with you up here. Now, the crazy part is that Emily also has a nativity set that looks very similar to this. Now, hers didn't come from a previous church, but it was her dad and her grandparents before her, and so so it doesn't look like we're just moving one nativity set from place to place, but we actually have two that are very similar, but they tell very different stories about how we have them and what they mean. And like any good nativity, what's important about a nativity set isn't just how it looks. But there's a whole lot of other things that come with it. Part of it are the memories that come along with a nativity set, and the main part of that memory is that the figurines that are there, each of them represent a different part of the Christmas story. And so when we get all of them in one place, we have more of that story that we can tell, and so we can be reminded of the whole story. But the other part of this is that there's also a memory behind the nativity itself, like the one that I received as a Christmas present. Now, I have another one that has a lot of memories for me also that my grandmother made back in the day, back when you could still get thread on wooden spindles. We don't put this one up very often because it's relatively old and a little bit fragile now. But still tells a story of my grandmother. It was my dad's, but my grandmother had it. She gave it to my dad. My dad has since given it to me, and it gets put up every once in a while, but not very often anymore. But there's still that story behind it as well. And I would imagine that some of your nativities also have some very similar stories. But there's something that's missing in this setup. When you look at this, when you take a look at this, there is part of the nativity that is here, but it feels like it's missing a few characters, doesn't it? Like we're missing a few pieces here. And if you're thinking that, well, you'd be right, because we are missing a few pieces. Now, I originally had a different plan for how this was going to work today, but ran into some technical issues, and so it's not working quite the way that I hoped that it would. But there is something as we go on this journey today that I want us to think about. And that is that everyone in this story, in this nativity scene, whether present yet or not, was on some sort of journey. Mary and Joseph had to make the journey from Nazareth down to Bethlehem while she was pregnant. And in Bethlehem, they would have gotten there, and it was full to bursting with people, and so they couldn't find a place to stay, which was how they ended up in the stable. Now, the other part about this is that they probably didn't have a plan for staying like a super long time in Bethlehem. Remember, for all the stories that we tell of the wise men and the shepherds and the angels and all of that being there, and for all of our nativity sets that show all of them there in one place at one time, on the night that Jesus was born, they weren't all there. Only some of them were there that night. It was up to 2 years later before the Magi, before the wise men, would have gotten to the baby Jesus. At that point, Jesus could have been in his terrible twos when they showed up. Now, hopefully at that point, the little drummer boy would have stopped drumming, and that hopefully at that point, Mary and Joseph and the baby weren't still staying in a stable. That's the hope. We don't really know any of that for sure. But let's remember the wise men in this. So let's bring them into the story. Now, the wise men are a different part of this story. Now, there's something fun that you can do that is even kind of accurate, and that is that when you go to put up your nativity scenes every year, whether you do that in July and August like Walmart does, or whether you do that at a more reasonable time, after Thanksgiving, is that you can take that when you set your nativity scenes up, is you don't set the wise men up with the rest of the nativity. I've had friends in other churches that they take them and they start putting the wise men out on windowsills around the sanctuary, so that as they go from each week during Advent and before we get to Epiphany, the wise men are moving from window to window to window all the way through. And they continue to make that movement until they get to the rest of the nativity, until they are there with the baby Jesus. Now, for ours today, we're just going to kind of separate them digitally with a few snaps of the fingers before we bring everyone back together. And we're reminded that the wise men were on their own journey. It's one they kind of knew what they were getting into when they started. But then when they get there, they're thrown into the internal politics of Judea at the same time. And between Herod and the Roman Empire and the religious leaders, those last two weren't as much of a factor with them, but they'll come into play later in the Gospels. And so they're thrown into that mess. These guys, and we don't really know how many of them that there were, but 3 is a good number that we use and works well for us, follow a star not directly to the manger, but to Judea. And once they're there, they stop and see Herod to see what it is that he knows about the newborn king. And this is the point where they get caught up in all of those politics. And so then it's from there that they make their way to the Holy Family, and they take their gifts to this small family. And then because of the situation that they're in, they're warned in a dream not to go back to Herod. Now, sometimes I think we gloss that point over too much, because it wouldn't have been easy for them to make that decision not to go back to Herod. They'd been there long enough to get a sense of who Herod is, and it wouldn't have been a lightly made decision for them to go back a different route, because they wouldn't have wanted to upset Herod at all. They wouldn't have wanted to upset him, and we see that their concerns are justified, because the next thing that happens after they leave and they don't go back to him is that Herod then goes on this rampage, and that causes the Holy Family to move to Egypt for a time, and Herod, out of fear, kills all of the boys under the age of 2 because he doesn't want one of them growing up and becoming the king, all because he wanted to hold on to power and control and authority. If they'd been caught, the wise men probably would have suffered the same fate. Now, the other part of that is that if they had returned to Herod, they probably also would have suffered the same fate. Their only option was to go back home a different way and hope that they weren't going to get caught. When we take a look now at the whole nativity, so let's bring the whole thing in here. What we see are represented in all of these figures are a lot of different journeys that have all brought them to this place and to this time. And so now let's bring all the pieces of our journey today back together. We started off by thinking about the stories that our nativities tell, both the story of Jesus' birth and the story of the nativity itself. Where did it come from? Did someone give it to us? What does it mean to us? And each part of the nativity tells the story of a different journey. The shepherds who were watching their flocks by night, Mary and Joseph in their journey to be counted and then to have a child, the wise men who were following a star to meet a newborn king. The destinations for each of them were important, but they were shaped even more by their journeys than they were by anything else. The shepherds would go back to tending their flocks. Theirs was probably the most boring of all of the journeys, or it would have been if they hadn't been interrupted by singing choirs of angels and an announcement of a baby lying in a manger and all of those types of things. Mary and Joseph probably had the hardest journey. They had a specific job to do, but that got interrupted first by a pregnancy that both of them were struggling with how to understand. And then that got interrupted with not having a place to stay and moving then out into a stable where their baby would be born and they'd lay him in a manger. But the longest and the most complex journey goes to the wise men, who first had to know what the star meant, which was its own kind of journey. Then they had to travel from places in the east to Bethlehem, and then they had to navigate the very difficult political waters of Judea and Rome and Herod. And then they made it to the child and had to return home, not by retracing their steps, but by a different way, so that they could avoid all of the other trouble. None of these journeys went the way that they were expected. They had a lot of different other stops along the way. There were detours and slowdowns and unexpected events that all took place. And if all of that sounds familiar, well, it should. Because that sounds like a lot like 2020, doesn't it? How 2020 went? And thankfully, that year is over now. But when we stop to think about it, it wasn't just that last year was bad and was like that. It may have been a more extreme example than most, but if we go back 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, how often did they go just as we thought they were going to do? Our journeys often look a lot like the Nativity. There are different pieces to it, and each piece represents a whole different path that we took. And it all ends up coming together in one place, but it represents so much more that happened, the good and the bad. But all of it has one thing in common. Whether we're looking at shepherds and Mary and Joseph, or even the wise men, it's that God was there. God called each of them to their journey and guided them through it. And God does the same thing with us. He calls us to go on a journey. He may give us the destination, or we may not know quite what it is, but the journey itself is going to be the challenge. But no matter what happens, we can know that He is there with us as we go. We don't know yet what 2021 will bring, and I don't know that there has ever been a time when I have said truer words than that. Right now, I'm not even really sure what the destination is, much less what the journey itself is going to look like. But that's okay. That's okay because I know that I don't go on that journey alone. We are on that journey together. And most importantly, God goes with us and will help us to navigate that path. I hope and I pray that you have a happy new year, and I am looking forward to seeing what this new journey will bring and where we are going to go together. But know, most importantly, that God goes with us through it, and that when we get to the end of it, we'll have our own new story to tell. I invite you to take a few moments now for some reflection and think about your past destinations and your past journeys and how they've gone, and then maybe begin to think about where do you think God is leading you in this year. And now let us go with a few words of a benediction. May you go knowing that God goes with you. That we are on a journey and a destination, that it will be interrupted, it will be unexpected, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways. But most of all, through all of it, we know out of God's love for us that He goes with us and that we are not alone. So I invite you now to go into this world, to go on to your next journey and your next destination. Go in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen, and go in peace.